So thank you. It's been a bit of a sizzling start with session one. I think some of the stories and the science that came through this morning, I can see the cogs turning and some really important pieces of the jigsaw puzzle fall into place. So thank you very much for our three opening speakers. It's a tough act to follow, but I think I've got a great lineup to compete with that. And I guess this session of speakers, we're sort of shifting from the stories and the science behind the river to more about how we make that happen. So it's all about communities and it's all about partnership. And I think you're going to hear some of those themes come through with our next three speakers. The first ones I want to introduce are from our Hunter LLS Aboriginal Communities team. We've got Allison, Warry and Toby Whaleboat coming to speak. They're freshly minted from the New South Wales Premier's Award last week, where they were finalists for the diversity category. So we're very proud of them here, and we wanted to provide them the opportunity to tell their story about how they're working with community on improving the health and resilience of the Hunter River. So welcome Allison and Toby.
Hello, I'd like to acknowledge Tim's warm welcome this morning and thank him and the Wonnarua people for having us today. I'm Allison. I'm a proud Warramai woman, however I've done most of my growing up here on Wonnarua country in Singleton, basically in Denali on the floodplain right next to the river. So my childhood home is still there. Actually, my parents live there to this day. So I spent most of my childhood down the river swimming. I'm currently the Upper Hunter Aboriginal Community Engagement and NRM Officer with Hunter Local Land Services, but in a former life, I was part of the Hunter Aboriginal Riverkeeper team with Soil Conservation Service.
Hi everyone, I'm Toby Whaleboat. I manage the Aboriginal programs for the Hunter region for LLS. I am a Meriam man. I come from the Meriam Nation in far north Queensland, but I've been working down here now in the Hunter for over 20 years, working and supporting our Aboriginal land management teams and local Aboriginal land councils and TO organisations.
All right, so HEART basically was a project that was developed to give Indigenous people the opportunity to find employment pathways and, in that environmental sector, but we focused mostly on riparian restoration with Indigenous land management practices. We also got the opportunity to do a lot of cultural engagement with knowledge holders and elders and things like that. So it was really, really beneficial in keeping us connected to our culture.
Yeah, the HEART team was a great initiative. The objectives of the HEART team and the strategy for the Hunter Aboriginal Riverkeepers team was to employ an Aboriginal project manager and up to 4 Aboriginal trainees. We, through the strategy and partnerships, we were looking to support Aboriginal community members to connect to country, and a lot of those members come from local communities, and to have them involved in the HEART project, it was an incredible opportunity for them to participate, and also for Soil Conservation Services that employed them to have that Aboriginal knowledge, traditional land management knowledge, come through the Aboriginal land management team members was quite incredible. The trainees were enrolled in Conservation Land Management Cert 3 course, and they were part of the 22 students that graduated from 24 that enrolled, so it was a high graduation rate. So the trainees, they were enrolled in the CLM course, Cert 3, and they were also enrolled in the Cultural Burn course that began in 2020. And most of them graduated only a couple of weeks ago. And now we have qualified Indigenous fire practitioners, 20 of them that graduated 3 weeks ago. So, next year we're looking to employ these Indigenous fire practitioners. So it's really rewarding in terms of them participating in all the courses.
So, the floods. They had a massive impact, obviously, on our work. Basically, because everywhere we worked was in a riparian zone. And I forgot about this fence. This was on the Kruai River. And we'd put that fence in there to keep out some stock on a property, and 2 weeks later a flood came through and basically knocked most of it out. So then we replaced it, and then I think 6 months later the same thing happened again, so then we replaced it. So it's funny looking back on it now, but back then not so great. So what we did during the flood, so it did stop us from doing a lot of things. I recall one day being at Barami Creek and saying to one of the team members, oh gee, I wish we could work on a creek that had water in it for once, because we started in the drought time, and then it started raining and it didn't stop. So yeah, we focused on our training units and things like that, and when we could get back out to site we did, but yeah, we had to replace a lot of re-veg sites. If it wasn't floods, it was wombats causing havoc. So but yeah, I'd forgotten about all the memories until I put this together, so it's quite funny. All right, so some of the outcomes was obviously Toby's mentioned, and I've mentioned the Cert 3 in conservation land management, but then it's changed over to ecosystem management now. We had a bit of a tailor-made cert as well, because they threw in quite a bit of Indigenous land management and engagement. The cultural fire practitioner training, as Toby just mentioned, and we've just graduated from that. We also have just started just this week, and we have to have it done before Christmas, I've been told, our Cert 4, so that's fun this time of the year. Employment pathways, so myself, I work with local land services now, but some of the other members, Jonice, she's still with Soil Conservation Service, Kyle, he's with Lake Mac Council, and the others have sort of gained employment pathways out of that. The on-ground skill development, we learnt all sorts of things, fencing, weed management, machineries, you name it. Cultural heritage training, seed collection, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was really, really positive, rewarding training. Okay, right, so here's... this is some of our achievements. So we did take out the 2021 Regional Land Care Award for our work on riparian areas, and that's us there with our little award. We also got a DI New South Wales award in 2022 as well, but my favourite picture is this one of Kyle and myself with our sign, because this is only taken 3 weeks ago, and it shows the employment pathways and the positive, and we're continuing to work together even though we're not in the same team anymore. So I catch up with Kyle specifically probably at least every couple of weeks, and we get to work together again. So to me that was a really good achievement, that we've both gone on different pathways, but we come back together, and that's a success. All right. Okay, the message stick here. All right. We need to get more agencies supporting, not leading, supporting Indigenous people to run their own show. When you do that, you have really good outcomes. We've got all this knowledge that we can bring to the table. More focus is definitely needed on employment pathways after the training phase is complete. So not just the training, make sure that these people have somewhere to actually go afterwards.
Yeah. So where to from here? We heard the good news about the HEART team and the outcomes they've achieved. However, there's still more work to be done to let First Nation people lead in terms of land management. Within the Aboriginal program through LLS, we are seeing Aboriginal people leading with their cultural burns throughout the region. And we're working closely with the Wanneroo, with all the local Aboriginal land councils and TO organisations, and to build their capacity of their Aboriginal land management teams. And there'll be more cultural burns next year that we're looking to undertake. And these organisations and the Aboriginal land management team members, they will lead the cultural burns. And LLS and other organisations will support them in terms of undertaking the cultural burns in various vegetation types. So again, there's still more work to be done. We need to include Aboriginal people in the co-design and management framework of policies and mitigation strategies, especially along the Hunter River, because the Hunter River has so many and is in abundance in terms of cultural heritage significance for the Aboriginal people. So we need to include them in the co-design of mitigation strategies that we plan to develop. Also, I put in there two dot points there in regards to due diligence work. So, prior to work being undertaken within riparian areas, you need to consult with your local Aboriginal Land Council or TO organisation from your local area, especially in an area that hasn't been assessed for cultural heritage items and sites of significance. So prior to work being undertaken, we must ensure that due diligence is in place to ensure that Indigenous and Aboriginal cultural heritage items are not harmed.
So lastly, why would you have Indigenous-led projects in the Hunter Catchment? Well, the obvious. The knowledge is there. We have songline connections, water, fire, vegetation, animal, sky. It's all connected to us. We don't see the landscape as anything other than a whole beautiful system. We tread lightly. We use a very holistic approach to things. We don't go in sort of, rip, tear, bust. I found one of the most positive things about our working with an Indigenous team is that we have continued learning and sharing of our cultural practices, and we each bring something, and it's a culturally safe space to be able to do that. And basically, we just need to listen to Mother Earth. What is she saying? She'll let you know when she's sick. We just need to listen. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Toby. I realised in my haste to get everyone back in their chairs and back into the session, I didn't introduce myself. So my name is Clare MacDougal. I'm the Healthy Landscapes Manager at Hunter Local Land Services based in our Patterson office. So I get to deal with the wonderful people in our team and a lot of the wonderful people in this room on a daily basis. That's my 9 to 5 job. I've also got the other part of I'm a landholder also, not far from here in Singleton in the lovely Lambs Valley. So I do appreciate and understand a lot of what our customers and stakeholders are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So another wonderful person I get to deal with on a daily basis in my role is Glenn Lyons. I'm sure pretty much everyone in the room would have had the pleasure of dealing with Glenn and the rest of his team through his catchment teams here with Hunter Local Land Services. They're very much the boots on the ground, right from Hexham in the estuary right up into the Upper Hunter and around our flood mitigation scheme, assets and a whole range of things. So without further ado, please welcome Glenn to the stage.
Hi everyone. I'm going to speak today about LLS riparian projects and services. Some of the key outcomes we're looking to achieve through our services include improving river ecological health, and we're doing that in a way that improves riparian and in-stream habitats. We're also looking to reduce riverbank erosion and flood risk, primarily through increasing riparian vegetation. And we're also looking to improve the condition of estuaries and wetlands through improving the catchment and rivers upstream, as well as through estuary-based partnerships. Here's a summary of some of the key actions that I'm implementing with my team and with other teams to improve rivers and aquatic biodiversity. This has got a focus on the river corridor itself. There's many other actions and initiatives working elsewhere in the catchment. So we're working to improve riparian vegetation condition and connectivity. So we're looking to connect up remnant riparian vegetation because river ecosystems work better. They function better when they are connected. We're also looking to revegetate riverbanks, primarily through natural regeneration, but also through strategic plantings. We're looking to stabilise river erosion, but in a way that facilitates river reach-based revegetation. So we're not just going out and picking individual erosion sites, we're actually doing a river reach-based approach. We're looking to improve Hunter River red gum remnants because they're endangered. You'll hear more about those later. We're looking to improve drought refuge pools. They're important for people, they're important for the river, and they're important for in-stream biodiversity such as platypus. We're also looking to increase revegetation under the Hunter Valley Flood Mitigation Scheme. So the scheme is managed by the Department of Planning and Environment, the Water Group. LLS, we have a role in contributing to the cost of maintaining the scheme. We also do landholder engagement, we monitor works, and we do forward works plans. So we're working with the department and also the main contractor in terms of soil conservation to increase the extent of revegetation that occurs in many of the long-term legacy riverbank stabilisation structural works that exist throughout the Hunter Valley. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to move those structures to a much more resilient state to reduce erosion, bearing in mind they're at some of the most high hazard sites there are in the Hunter Valley, and long term to reduce the ongoing long-term maintenance costs. Another thing we're doing is we're supporting landholders to develop and implement property scale riparian plans. So what does that look like? In terms of our services, our bread and butter is our advisory services. So we provide technical advice and general advice on a whole range of topics. It's done through various teams across Hunter LLS. My team has been really busy in the last 2 years delivering flood recovery based advice. So advice on flood recovery impacts, options, riparian management advice, soil erosion, but we also provide advice on a range of other topics which we deliver in conjunction with other teams. A key part of what we're trying to do is to assist landholders to make more informed decisions and also to take action. So many times we're providing advice when we're not doing it through a grant. We're actually working with landholders who are using their own resources to put in place long-term change. One of the other things we do is we provide local information. And post-flood, people are always wondering, who do I talk to? How do I access assistance? So we actually fill that space and have an active role in that. We also provide local information and share learnings on what's applicable in a given catchment and river system in terms of practices. Another part of our work involves various catchment-based partnerships. And one of the examples I'm providing here is Whaleboat Brook. So Whaleboat Brook, it's got a long and rich flood history, as we heard earlier today. And our role there is to build on the work over many decades by many landholders, community groups and various agencies and organisations. So a current project that we've got at the moment is the Whaleboat Brook Habitat Restoration Project, which involves linking communities with iconic species. Like many other partnerships we've done in this catchment before, it involves many partnerships with landholders throughout the catchment, with land care groups, in this case with Bulga Coal, the councils, the Department of Planning and Environment, and various others. So our role, in summary terms, is about assisting landholders and also land care to improve riparian vegetation, and we do that through a range of advisory, capacity building and on-ground related services. A really interesting part of this project is community engagement. It's got an element of community engagement in environmental DNA, community-based citizen science surveys. And that's what that photo on the right is. It was taken a couple of weeks ago and there's 50 sites throughout this catchment that have involved 40 community members taking water samples. They've been trained in how to do it. They've taken water samples in a coordinated fashion, and those samples have gone off to a lab, and we expect to see the results next month, targeting the presence of platypus and also water rat, also known as ricali. So the community is actually actively involved in identifying important biodiversity and its occurrence throughout the catchment, because they're also involved in obviously protecting those habitats as well. So what are all these things about? I guess the long game is about improving catchment scale river health and resilience. We've heard about that today. Whaleboat, as Kirsty talked about, it's a really good case study of change. And building on the back of work since the 60s, it's a really good one to take a look at a catchment scale. These are paired photos. The one on the left is from 1963, and it shows the town of Whaleboat in the bottom right of the photo. And the photo on the right is just from a couple of months ago, from 2023. So 1963, that followed the big floods, the 49 flood and the 55 flood and various others, and it was before the Hunter Valley Flood Mitigation Scheme really got active. And so you can see the extent of riverbank erosion, stream widening, sedimentation, and a lot of damage and impacts. So fast forward 60 years of sustained work, so it is a really long-term game. The main river channel of the Whaleboat Brook has really increased in terms of riparian vegetation extent and condition. And the good news is, with all of the major floods that we had last year, it stood up really well. So that we haven't seen the really extensive riverbank erosion that we saw before. So it actually is working. There's more work to do in the Whaleboat because there's been some issues in various minor tributaries in that system, so the work does continue. Another aspect of our work involves improving riparian vegetation, so working with landholders to bring about on-ground change in improving riparian veg. So we do that through a number of means. I mentioned before about our advice. We also continue to run a land management incentives program, which assists landholders to implement improved riverbank vegetation changes and change grazing practices in priority catchments. More detail about that's on our website. We're doing less grants than we did before, but they still remain an important part of what we do. But we're trying to use our grants increasingly as a basis for our extension programs to advocate change to other landholders. Something else that we're starting to do more and more are property scale riparian plans. So we're doing those in strategic river reaches with a view to long-term catchment scale riparian vegetation improvement. There's a real focus on doing that in a way that enhances natural regeneration, like you can see in the bottom right photo. So that's from the Merriwell Plateau, where we're working with landholders on large properties, and we're doing it with multiple landholders over significant sections of river. And the property riparian plans are integrated as part of a whole farm plan approach, and they sit beside a grazing management plan. So it's about working for a really long-term approach because of the significant scale of change. So we've been asked to talk about flood observations and implications. We observed, and my team, significant erosion in sandbed streams, particularly where they lack riparian vegetation. So we've heard more about that today. The contrast was well-vegetated river reaches showed resilience, particularly to the successive major floods. We saw sites that didn't have enough riparian vegetation or it was lacking, and they were degraded in the first flood last year. They were degraded more the next flood, and even the one late last year, which in many catchments wasn't quite as significant, was causing compounding a large amount of damage. So the observations are there on the value of veg. Some of the observations, you could see the photo on the left is the extensive sand slugs that exist in Whaleboat Brook. So there's a lot of sand moving out of unstable parts of that catchment upstream. There's some erosion there in the central photo, and that's exposed some legacy long-term mesh-based river stabilisation works from the flood mitigation scheme. And I guess the photo on the right sort of highlights some of the implications. So, we know off the back of the flood that wider and better riverbank vegetation buffers are often needed. but it's really emphasised the need to focus on revegetating river reaches at a bigger scale over individual site-based stabilisation works. So that's one of the real implications. The photo on the right is Gavin, who's from our Catchment team, and he's dealing with the challenge that was mentioned earlier today of establishing vegetation on riverbanks. Is easy to say, it's a lot harder to do in practice, and that's the space that we work in every day. So some final learnings just quickly, touched on some before, is really about planning well and to do manageable steps towards long-term goals. And we talk with landholders and groups about this. It's really a lot about doing what you can maintain and having a realistic think about that before you start. For groups and agencies looking to work with landholders and communities, it's really about tailoring it to local needs and priorities of individual landholders, because it varies a lot. So from one landholder to the next, it takes a lot of work, and it does need a tailored approach. But also to tailor to the needs of the river itself. Listen to the river and what it needs. And I guess the obvious one is to consider and learn from the impacts of the major floods off the back of drought and fire and all those other major extremes. So I guess they're the learnings. There's plenty of other learnings out there that we're taking every day and week through interacting with our customers, but we're really confident through our Catchment team that by applying those learnings and continuing to implement those services I've mentioned before, we are really making a difference, I believe, to improving the health and resilience of the hunter. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, and Deanne's onto it. So I'd like to welcome the next presentation we have today from Deanne Nelson-Pritchard. Welcome Deanne onto the stage. She's the Principal Estuary Officer with Maitland City Council, here to talk about the Hunter Estuary Alliance and the Coastal Management Program. Welcome, Deanne.
Thanks, everybody. So we're here to talk about the Hunter Estuary Coastal Management Program. Basically, it's the other end of the river for where we are now. I'd also like to acknowledge our traditional owners of the custodians of the Hunter Estuary and its catchments, the councils of Maitland, Newcastle, Port Stephens, Dungog, Cessnock, and our local land services, Hunter Water, recognise our Aboriginal elders past, present and future. I'd also like to acknowledge that we really need to make sure that our traditional owners are part of our project that we undertake. The Coastal Management Program is a journey. It's not something that's just going to be written and left. It needs to be something that always organically comes together. And we need to make sure that our traditional owners are part of the project so that we learn and walk together on this journey. Our area for the Hunter Estuary goes up to Melville Ford, basically, just before. So that's 64 kilometres up the Hunter. I've got 75 kilometres up the Patterson River and up to the Seam Weir on the Williams River. Obviously it stops because of a weir. It used to go further. The Hunter Estuary itself is a very, very large area. So we have a debate as to whether the Clarence or ourselves are the biggest of the catchment areas, but we've got 22,000 square kilometres that we've got a plan for. We've got an estuary, as I say, that goes through 5 local government areas. It's highly modified, as we've been discussing today. Its overall water quality in 2017 was 124th out of 160 in the lower area, so in your ports type area. Around Maitland area, we actually are the worst water quality in the whole of New South Wales. So that actually was really daunting, and that's actually why Maitland City Council is now championing the writing of the Catchment Coastal Management Program on behalf of all the 5 councils. As we've discussed today, it's a culturally significant area to our First Nations people. We've got a home of international shorebirds and wetlands area. So that's actually been looked after by our Hunter Wetlands area and Ramsar sites, but something that we really, really need to plan for to make sure that we have protection of that area, but also progression of that area as things change within our river. As we know, we're an area of significant growth. Maitland's one of those cities that is actually charging ahead with development because that's where the state is telling us that the people are coming. So we can see it, we need to find that balance. We're also a significant economic zone, the Newcastle port, agriculture, mining, everything needs to be found a balance and needs to still occur so that we actually have a functioning area. With all of that comes huge pressures on our estuary. We have a lot of things coming in, we've had a lot of change, had a lot of discussions today about what it used to be, what it is now. The Coastal Management Program is actually a really exciting time that we actually can all now work together towards something that actually creates and shapes the river that we want. We've had a lot of change that has happened in our community. 10 years ago, everybody thought of the Hunter as a drain. We now have a community that wants to turn around and be part of that and embrace that asset that we have. What is the Coastal Management Program? It's a very boring thing, it's a legislated thing, it's something that we're driven to do. It's tasked to councils to create the Coastal Management Program in alignment with a coastal manual. Sorry, Neil, didn't mean to say it was boring. Sorry, Pam, oops. So there's 5 stages. Stage 1 is looking at what we've got, where we've been, what we're doing, and that's a gaps analysis. We've just finished that. We're now moving into stage 2. That's where we're doing our research phase. So you've heard of us for bits and pieces, but as we come to the end of stage 2, stage 3, that's when we will be coming out and talking to you. That's where we will be working with people to find out the options that we want to put into our coastal management program, so that when we actually get something certified by the Minister in stage 4, we go straight into implementation in stage 5 and start driving that change. Why do we need it? We've got so many people that are doing such fantastic work, but we haven't actually got that unity as to what we should be working towards. So the Coastal Management Program is actually that opportunity to drive that unity and have a vehicle to actually go forward on. And we call ourselves the Hunter Estuary Alliance. That's not actually a group of people, it's actually a movement. It's not just us that's changing, it's everyone that's got to create that project and be part of the program. We actually looked at the community values in stage 1, and that's how we found that things are changing. People are wanting to enjoy their river, people are wanting to be near it, and people are actually recognising the health implications of having a healthy river and having a healthy riparian zone. So we're listening to the community. It's many and varied, it's complex, and that's why we all need to make sure that we're all part of it. Stage 1, our findings. We found that the government is fragmented for the Hunter Estuary. There's no one sole group that looks after it. As I say, it's considered to be the worst water quality in our midstream area, and that's because we don't have that tidal flushing area. The tidal extent goes all the way up to Melville Ford, but we actually don't have the surge of water to clean it out. So we're actually 124th out of 160 purely because we've got dynamics of the river coming in and out. Natural meandering is seen as a problem. It can actually be a benefit. So we need to look at how we actually drive that change and get that education out there, that we can actually work with our river and be part of our river and not actually try to direct it as to what it should be. The realisation of climate change is showing more and more. We're seeing that the tides are increasing, we have sea level rise. We need to prepare for that. And that's actually what the Coastal Management Program is actually directed to do. We need to start looking at what we need to do to adapt, to be resilient, to look at what our ecosystems need, whether we need to actually start looking further up the catchment as to whether we need to find places for the species to be if they're not going to be able to be in, say, a mangrove area as it moves into sand swamp. The degradation of the river through the past vegetation removal is very, very evident in our area, particularly in our lower reaches. The sediment slugs that are coming down the river, they're moving all the time. But we're working on projects, as we see with the local land services, to actually change that. We need to do the whole of the river, and the estuaries need to be part of it. So our stage 2 research that came out was that we need a business case for a lead group to actually make sure that all projects are working together and towards the one goal. We need to map the inundation of the impacts of the Hunter Estuary from the predicted climate change. We need to look at the habitat mapping and prioritisation of the rehabilitation projects, particularly informed by climate change. We need to have a look at our evaluation of water quality and prioritising actions. Now, thankfully, as part of the development of the Coastal Management Program, I actually can go further up into the catchment. So for our water quality, we're actually looking forward up to see what else is actually impacting. So we can actually work in with other agencies, such as local land services, to make sure that we actually work in together to actually fix the upper catchment as well as the lower catchment. Obviously, whatever we do in the upper area impacts the lower. So does it actually impact if we start in the lower and impacts in the upper. We have carp, as we've just discussed before. They've actually found a carp at Tomago, and apparently it was this big. It could have been the fisherman's thing, but it was actually there. So it is actually part of the Hunter Estuary Coastal Management Program that we'll be looking at it. We need to look at our erosion areas and prioritise them. We need to align the coastal councils to make sure that all of our protectionisms are equal. And we need to actually have a look at whether the socioeconomic values are still the same or whether they've changed. And particularly in COVID, we found a shift that people actually wanted to be part of the river. Of course, they couldn't go anywhere. So the river's actually being acknowledged again. So we need to always keep going back to look at the values, but also the opportunities of what people want to actually do with the river, whether our economic gains are actually going to change over time. So what can you do to help? You can seek to be part of a stakeholder group, which we've actually just started now. I'm doing 3 at the moment, 1 on habitat erosion, 1 on water quality, 1 at climate change. Don't worry if you're not part of it now. We will be coming out as a stakeholder meeting at the end, inviting everybody to be part of that. And if you're not part of that, we'll come to you in stage 3 and continue to talk. We're not stopping anything here. We're going to make sure that the conversation continues to flow. We've got a website that is actually dedicated to the Coastal Management Program, hunterestuary.newsouthwales.gov.au, and that's actually got a place that you can go and say, keep informed, pop your name there, and I'll make sure that I include you into the spreadsheets to keep information to you and seek out your involvement. And what I really, really do ask for is that people participate in the feedback opportunities as they arise. I don't know what I don't know, and I'm not going to say I know everything. So please tell me if you need to be part of it, and I'll definitely include you.
Thank you, Deanne. Now, the last speaker for the session, she's already introduced herself, I think, as the sprinkles on top of the sundae, so be ready to be very excited, enthusiastic and interactive. Welcome Jo Taranto from Good for the Hood up to the stage.
Thank you so much. You've had 3 beautiful scoops of ice cream, and as I said, I'm here to just do something on top, and let's hope it's tasty. I want you to close your eyes, first and foremost. This is an exercise of trust. I did it with 13-year-olds the other day. None of them closed their eyes for a good 5 minutes. So if you can just close your eyes, I want you to think about a place that you've been to before. A natural place, an environment that you felt captivated by. Maybe it was the beauty, the power, the complexity, the tranquility of this place. And I want you to keep that place with you while I do this talk today. And I want to start with some words from the guru, the man himself, David Attenborough, who said that the whole of life is about coming to terms with yourself and the natural world. Why are you here? How do you fit in? And what's it all about? And that's what I'm going to talk about today, the nature of us. And you can open your eyes. And my first job was an occupational therapist. I graduated in 2004 from the University of Queensland, and I started work at Logan Mental Health facility, which was in community mental health at the time. And my job was to get 20 people with chronic mental health illness conditions and help them navigate either life outside hospital or work or whatever it is that we were working on at that stage. And the first client I ever met was a 19-year-old boy who had schizophrenia, and his schizophrenia manifested in olfactory or smell-based delusions or perceptions of the world. And the occupational therapists love using this model to break people into the task and the person and the environment. And I spent 13 years using this model until one day I decided that I wanted to work with the environment. And my attitude was that that's great. I'm just going to move over into that circle over there and now focus my energy on another compartment of life on Earth. And it wasn't until I met an Aboriginal bloke called Kieran Dunn, who was a river keeper, that I was doing some work on with in Sydney. And he said, you know, we're not just connected to country, right? That we are country. That I realised I needed a better model. And so I've kind of bastardised this one a little bit to make sense of the world for me, because I have spent a lot of time looking at people as separate, connected but separate to the environment, and it's taken me some work to realise that actually our shared ecology is exactly the nature of us. We are the river is us, let's get on with it. So my first job was as a river keeper at the Parramatta River Catchment Group, a very small catchment, nothing like the Hunter, but it made me realise that that connection and being part of the world is not only critical, it is everything. And I know I don't have to tell you what that means for the work that you do. But one thing I've noticed from this work is that a lot of people get really bogged down in the weeds of the work, and it makes it really hard to really enact change. And so that's why I go around talking to communities, because I feel like there's power in understanding the nature of humans, our flaws and our foibles, and helping people to step outside that. I really passionately believe that water is the most beautiful space to talk about, because one minute we can be swimming in it, the next minute we can be drinking it, and the next minute it's part of us. There's not too many things that we can see that full circle, and it is truly the most circular system on Earth. I love the fact that water doesn't ever get made or created, it just is in whatever form it is, and that's a really beautiful thing to think about, and also scary when we see our river systems so degraded. One thing I've really been passionate about is understanding why community groups get so stuck. And Michael Marion was a futurist who in the 50s said, we have this phenomenon called the sandbox syndrome. We call them sandpits in Australia. And I've got young kids, and this resonated for me. Why do we put kids in sandpits? Does anyone want to have a go? Nice and loud. Keeps them quiet. That's it's true. What else? Just so they can make our lives difficult with sand in the pockets. There's one other reason. It contains them. They also really like it. And they do connect. There are lots of benefits from that sort of play. But Michael Marion said that if our groups, and he particularly was talking about American groups at that stage, but if environmental groups go deep into the sandpit, and you can do that in your own area, you can dig right down, it makes it really easy for the other adults outside the sandpit to continue to do what they're doing. And if you get so bogged down in your own sandpit that you're worrying just about your own group and what's going on, it makes it really, really hard to create change. And so he said, don't let the sandbox or the sandpit bog you down too much. If you focus only what's happening in your group and on your metrics and your measures and your politics, you're actually missing the big end game, which is the fact that you're all here as part of a network and a forum is kind of the point. You've got to look outside your own community and your own organisation if you want to create change. So they said that we need to find commonality with others. We need to form alliances, and we have to have measures of success which actually relate to improved outcomes. Your measures of success might be how many people come to your meetings, whether someone signed up to be secretary this year, how many people turned up to volunteer. That doesn't improve the river health. The measures of success have to be unified, and they have to actually relate to the outcomes that improve health. You can have great goals, but we have to make sure that we're all measuring the same thing. Otherwise, we get stuck in the sandpit. I love comparing how humans are similar to other species, and humans are absolutely the most ultra-social species on Earth, but we are not the only one. There's a lot of similarities with how bees interact. Is anyone a bee lover here? There's always a few. Everyone. You're all bee lovers, but some people are really into bees. These people were so into bees that they barcoded them, which if you think your job's tough, just imagine that. And they actually measured the interaction between bees. Now, if you know your honeybees, you know that they like to go and talk to each other, and they don't do that by using words, obviously. They use a thing called trophallaxis, where they put a little bit of the liquid from their mouth into the mouth of the other bees. Now, they don't just do this because they want to give them food. They actually do this as a social interaction. It's actually a way of communicating. And bees also have other ways of doing it, the little waggle dances and other things as well. But about 3 years ago, the scientists started to measure the trophallaxis of bees, and they barcoded them, and they had a look at whether all the bees do the same thing in the same way. And they realised that actually bees do things differently to other bees. There's actually individuals in there who are hypersocial, who spend way longer doing the trophallaxis than others. I don't know if any of you can relate, but that would be me. There are some who come and do it quickly and then go away. And I'm sure some of you can relate to that as well. And they realise there's a lot of similarities between how people interact to how bees interact. So I want to leave you with these 3 messages today, and that is that the nature of us relies on 3 things. Regeneration follows disruption, survival means collaborating, and systems must provide mutual benefit. And I'm going to quickly explain what all of those have to do with anything. The first thing is that you must look after yourself. Your health, your mental health, and your sanity is your biggest skill in anything you do for the environment. And that means regeneration for you. The best way to regenerate is to connect with country and to connect with nature itself. And I will show you a couple of things that will do that in a second. The next thing is to know that humans are designed for social interaction, and that actually we want to interact with each other. Now I'm going to get you to quickly stand up. This is going to ruin my time altogether, but I think it's kind of worth it. So I'm going to quickly stand up, and I want you to find a pair. And one of you is going to put your hands on your head and close your eyes. And the other one, it helps if you face them. And the other one is going to look at me. All right. Once your partner's got their eyes closed and you are pretty confident that they are not looking, when they open their eyes up, I want you to do this. And I want you to do it a few times. Don't say anything, and then I want you to see what happens. Okay, you can open your eyes up, partners. Okay, have a seat for me. There are cells in your brain that make you do what someone else is doing. If you've ever been to a shopping centre and you are starting to head towards someone in a shopping trolley and you start to do the weave, and then you do the duck, and then you do the weave, and you do that, they're your mirror neurons firing. When you do an exercise and you start yawning in front of someone and they yawn back, that's your mirror neurons firing. You are designed to be empathetic. You're designed to model what other people are doing. And if you're not using those to connect with people, even if those people fundamentally disagree with everything you're saying, then you're missing out on a wonderful opportunity. And that is that humans are hardwired for social connection. So remember that. And if you're not using... Someone's yawning over there. I'm going to start in a second. I want to say that we are leaving an era of absolute dominance, this sort of so-called unofficial era of Anthropocene, which is this human-led epoch that we're dominating nature, and we have to shift that. We have to get back to symbiosis and starting to talk about the fact that there's mutual benefit for protecting nature and ourselves, and that we should be talking about mutual benefit. We're nested into systems in human society as much as we are as catchments. So if you're not, thinking about the big picture and the little picture simultaneously, then we're missing the big picture, really. And as conservationists or protectors of nature or advocates or ambassadors, we must talk about mutual benefit, particularly with those people who don't give a shit about riparian zones or, carbon capture, whatever it is. There's a lot of people who don't really care about what you're talking about, and we have to make it within their interests. So that means talking about mutual benefits to human beings as well. So here's your homework. I want you to spend 120 minutes in nature every week. It seems like a lot, or for some of you, you might be like, I do that every day, which is great. 120 minutes is exactly the amount of time where you'll get the peak benefit from recharging with nature. Any more, it stays about the same, but up to 120 minutes, and the impacts are immense. All the things from cortisol levels dropping to diabetes reductions to maternal health, huge benefits to heart and mind. Obviously, we know the benefits of walking as well, particularly in nature. And today, your job is to connect with 3 strangers. Make sure you look, make sure you smile, and make sure you ask. Put those strings of conversation into the connection, and then get a way of keeping in touch with them. Make sure you make connection after today. Connection is only a connection if it goes somewhere. So whether it's a phone number or an email or a LinkedIn address or a photograph that you send them in the mail, I do not care. But your job is to connect with them after today. And more largely, when you are sharing the benefits to the environment of your message, please also share the benefits to the human beings who live in that area as well. Mutual benefit is entirely important when we're talking about the nature of our natural world, as it is when we talk about the nature of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. I'd like to welcome the other speakers up. Ali, Toby, Deanne, Glenn, come take a seat. We'll get the roving mics back out in the room. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really loving the journey that we're being taken on today, from the first session around the stories and the science of the river to more, I guess, in that last session around the connection with communities, the connection with nature. And I know at Hunter LLS, it's one of our kind of challenges and opportunities is to have that win-win. What is the mutual benefit in doing these things? What is that win-win scenario? So it's certainly a challenge we'll take up. Thanks, Jo. Righto, we've got our wonderful panel of speakers up here and a few roving mics in the room. We've probably only got 5 minutes, so get in quickly if you do have a question for any of our speakers. Yeah, Robin?
Thank you. Robin Parker from Hunter LLS Board. I really liked the way in which all of you talked about community, and Jo, you sort of wrapped it up in a bow at the end when you were talking about the mutual benefit. I wonder if all of you or any of you would like to talk about what, if you were starting again, you might do better. I think everyone here has a sense about the Hunter River and the community that came together after the 55 floods. And when we think about the SES, that started then. But, what would you do if you were starting again to engage more with the community that you are engaging with, and how we can better do that with all of our projects?
There's a lot of microphone passing. It's
looks like it's with me.
Here, Glenn.
Thank you. I guess for myself, one of the things, I've been working in the Hunter for over 20 years now, and the best case studies and the best example of ongoing building on previous efforts is where we've got a really good baseline of information. So if I was starting again, it would actually be to do that better, and it's one of the things that we're trying to do even better. So, we're doing drone surveys, we're doing vegetation surveys, we're trying to get really good baseline information so that then we can work with the landholder or group on the change at a site, and then we can capture as much information and learnings as we can. So that's probably a key one for me.
Anyone else with an answer to that question? You've bamboozled them, Robin. Any other questions from the floor?
Just one down here, Claire.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Well, hang on, one at the back first. Yep.
Hi there. Something that came out of all your presentations, and I have spoken with Allison about this before, is addressing the fear of natural disasters, and especially when you were talking, Deanne, about flooding and how do we address that sort of fear? So with fire, obviously, working with cultural burning might help to reduce that fear of fire, but with floods, it's another thing. I know my sister lost her house and her job during the Lismore floods, and she has now a lot of fear around floods or even rain when it rains. So when people have been through natural disasters, how do you sort of address that fear and address what we need to do when we know that people are fearful of going with the flow, essentially?
Yep. Ellie, you've got...
Yeah. I've spoken with you, Henrietta, about this before in the cultural burn space, I guess, and we have a mortal fear of natural disasters, and I can't sort of speak for the flood side of things, but I think having people, involved in things like that and showing them that it's not scary and it's, I guess it's not something to be feared. And if we look after, people sort of think, the asset is, houses or whatever that is, buildings, that sort of stuff. But the asset is actually the landscape or the river or the whatever it may be. Because if you look after that asset, then you don't have to be scared when you've got your houses sitting there, take care of the actual asset, and then that fear sort of goes. But yeah, as I said, that's sort of in the burn space, but anyone want to on the flood?
I think it's basically the same for flood. I mean, you can't prepare for the amount of rain that you're going to get, and Lismore was a classic example of that. My parents are in Ballina. They definitely got floods where they've never seen them before. I think it comes down to the same scenario of we need to talk with people, we need to get them prepared, we need to get them resilient. Things are going to happen. We're definitely going to have floods, we're definitely going to have fire. But if people actually accept that this is Australia and that we actually prepare ourselves for it and having our plans in place, it does make it easier. It certainly doesn't make it better, but it makes it easier.
I was just going to say, also, we've worked with a lot of communities that have trauma related to natural disasters, and I think that that's an increasing space that we need to give energy to, because it's a very real experience for your sister, for example, and we have to acknowledge that that is tremendously traumatic experience to go through for anyone, and we've got to look after that. So I definitely think being involved in preparedness and trying to get a little bit of normality back in there somehow too is part of that healing process.
In terms of natural disasters, Aboriginal people have come through a lot over the many tens of thousands of years. Basically, we should be talking to our elders. They have the stories on how they came through natural disasters. We have knowledge holders in our community that have the stories and can tell the stories about what happened, when, and what the community did to come through that natural disaster. So, first step I would say is talk to our elders within the community, approach our local Aboriginal land councils, our traditional owner organisations, get them involved. And like I said, in terms of co-design, in developing plans, they're there. The elders know the stories. Consult them, talk to them.
Thanks, panel. In the interest of having a good break with a bit of networking opportunity, we've probably got one more question.
Just a real quick one. Allison and Toby, the HEART program, is that ongoing? Is it stopped? Where are we at?
Unfortunately not. I would have liked to have seen it sort of continue or something. The concept was amazing, actually, because it sets up the groundwork for that. For like you can build on that forever. But no, it is something that I would like to see kick back off, even if it's in a different way or whatever, but that Indigenous land management teams, I think I'm really passionate about getting that sort of thing happening. And you could do it in riparian, you could do it on TSRs, you could do it on, cultural fire, whatever. But yeah, it was a great concept, and it is a shame that it sort of ended. But having said that, the positives that come out of it was, the employment pathways and the continued learnings and all that sort of thing. And we still all keep in touch and that sort of stuff. So yeah.
So thanks to all our speakers so far. We're about to break for lunch and we'll be back in the room at 1:30 to start. So Joe has set the challenge to speak to 3 people you don't know yet. But also, if you are interested in our next generation of river managers, our local land services display at the end there has the schools program on display. And Jane is our schools engagement officer. Jane and Laurie made this great little clip, which you'll be able to view. It's also on YouTube. It's Citizen Scientists in Action, and it was the very first Hunter River health check involving schools. So Beltrees, Elliston and St Bridget's School at Raymond Terrace were involved, and the kids collected water quality samples and they did water bug surveys. And this little 3-minute clip is so inspiring that the kids are learning this in schools at such a young age and really fostering that appreciation of what they have on their doorstep. So I encourage you to have a look at the film. If you don't get to see it today, have a look at it on our YouTube channel.